Okay, hello everybody. You're all very welcome to this special edition of the Holding It Together Apart podcast for St. Patrick's Day. And we're once again joining Nóirín Ní Riain, the Reverend Nóirín Ní Riain, internationally acclaimed spiritual singer, theologian, musicologist, writer, and Celtic spirituality expert. So Nóirín, lovely to see you again. Can't believe it's Paddy's Day. We're coming up to St. Patrick's Day and March. How are you keeping?
I'm keeping very well, Declan. Agus I dús báire, was rud gur meach an gweling all out ag pádrig. Cuirim fáilte rót, agus called fáilte roiv galéir gadí an lá éile fádrig sa. Seo lá anna háchtach gomórmór im bliana. Ach be mi de trachter sin níos déanaí.
Kahanawa Nóirín, a few words of Irish for Seachtain na Gaeilge as well. So it's hard to believe it's March already. I mean, we were last talking in St. Bridget's Day, before that in Imbolc, but suddenly we're here nearly coming up to the middle of March. Lots of things have changed, lots of things have moved on. But I suppose as we focus on St. Patrick's Day, it's a very different year this year for St. Patrick's Day. A little bit almost like last year, although I think people got in St. Patrick's Day last year before everything shut down. But it's going to be a different St. Patrick's Day this year, how it's celebrated across the world. But I wanted to start off by asking you your earliest memories of St. Patrick's Day. What do you remember as a child about it?
Well, before that, Declan, we might light a candle of connection between us, because this is all we can do this year, and maybe anybody who's looking into, if you have a candle nearby, you might ignite it. Because, of course, in the Irish tradition, we always believed, we know that when we were born, a candle is ignited in heaven. And that lasts for as long as we're here on this earth. Sometimes that can be a short little candle, but please God, for most of us, it's a long candle and flickering away up there. But it's our way of being connected to, at this time, that we're sending a rainbow. I'm sending a rainbow of connection up to you, Declan, and then by extension to everybody else who's looking in. So we light our little candles here. Agus ag gui ar neamh pádrig, tacht isteach ling agus bheith in our láthir anna adas a hámid ag caint ag an aum criúil. So
Beautiful, Nóirín. I'm going to pop it over here beside my little green rabbit. This was my mother's little green rabbit. I think it was my grandmother's, but it reminds me of St. Patrick's Day, so I'll pop him over here. He's coming out for the spring.
And your daffodils too behind you there.
And our daffodils, they're lovely, the flowers. But I suppose those type of things, the flowers, the things are the earliest bits we remember of St. Patrick's Day. So in your childhood, did you go to parades? Were you big into music?
Well, let me tell you, see, my mother was a school teacher. I think I told you that before, Declan. She was a primary school teacher. And so in our primary school, this is years and years and years ago, way back in the 50s. St. Patrick's Day, we always had to get together with our tin whistles, you see. And we had to learn this tune, but we had to learn it all. It wasn't like an Irish tune at all, because there was no lift or swing to it. And imagine now 30 kids playing this now. Just imagine this now. It'll hurt your ears now. Can you just imagine it?
You know, there's something beautifully innocent about it, but it does bring back a memory for me as well, because I remember my sister had what was probably worse than the whistle is a recorder. And all the kids just had this recorder, and that was what we did, like you did for the parade. You walked up and then playing these recorders, which is the most awful sound. But I think it was almost funny for the parents. But so that's a big memory for you, learning that tin whistle tune.
because that's St. Patrick's Day, it's called, you see. And then when I went to university then and started going to music sessions, to traditional music sessions, next thing I heard this. There was this tune transformed with swing and a lift and lightness and, all just so. I often think back, now it's one of my favourite tunes, so I often think back on the damage, God help us, that was done on St. Patrick's Day. And then when I went to secondary...
If the fiddle and the bodhrán and all that together playing that, big difference to and a flute, of course, would be much softer than the tin whistle.
Yeah. Also dancing to it, the old traditional dancing.
Yes, of course.
Marvellous, So they were, and then when I went to secondary school, in Dundalk because my mother had a sister in the convent and we had school orchestra and I was the piano player, and so I'd have to accompany the yodel dum dum, the same thing to that same tune, again played by people who just didn't understand the sean-nós, jigs or the reels or the swing and the lift that goes with all of that.
And you're missing piece there maybe in the education then that it was kept to the kind of tin whistle recorder, which was maybe easier to teach because you're missing the beauty and the, as you say, the lightness of it. The other song I kind of remember very strongly around St. Patrick's Day was, of course, Hail Glorious St. Patrick, the big tenor song, which McCormack, my mother, used to have playing, and then some later tenors played it. So that's the other big one I remember. It was singing that at Mass and in the recorders, but not much else music, funny enough. It's really only in recent years we've seen the explosion and the celebration of Irish music across the globe and even in our parades. I also remember the parade as a kid. It was just a float with maybe somebody dressed up as St. Patrick's throwing oranges at you. And we've really evolved now to, particularly with St. Patrick's Festival Parade itself in Dublin, but all over the world and in all the towns and villages, a real celebration of, lots of varieties of dance, of music, of art, of ethnicities even within our parades, which is lovely to see.
Absolutely. Yes.
Hopefully no children who are still playing the recorder out there will take offence because that's liked as well.
Or the tin whistle or whatever, But that was just and yes, it is a time for celebrating. But of course, all of that distracts to the parade from the marvellous men that Patrick was. And we know a lot about him too, Declan, he left behind his Confessions.
A Welsh migrant, I believe, as he came here as a young boy.
That's right. Came here, was brought here. He was Welsh, sort of Roman English, and so that Roman streak about it. So he would have had a very luxurious young life. And then he was kidnapped by Irish slave traders. And they brought him over. I think he was the only Roman young lad that was kidnapped and brought him over here. And he had a dreadful time. He was out in the fields, minding the sheep. But for me, he has been a great influence on my life, actually, Declan, because all his callings from God were through the ear, you see. And that has been the area of my research. That's what I did my doctorate on, which was a theology of listening, which I called theophany, from God, theo, sown and sound. And so Patrick was a great example. He features in my books and so on, because he was called in a dream by God. So when he was this slave in Ireland minding the sheep, he was a shepherd. And while he was out in the cold and everything, he was asleep one night. God called him and said, "There's a boat waiting for you to take you back to your native England." And so he went and pleaded with the captain of just an ordinary little curragh boat, and the captain took him back eventually. And so when he went back then, he again went to live, and of course there was great rejoicing for him in his home place when he came back. But another night, he got another call in a dream saying, "Go back to Ireland." I think an Irishman came to him actually and presented him with a little scroll saying, "We need you, Patrick." And so he came back again and started to preach, even though he was preaching among these barbarians, as they were called, pagans now, I suppose you'd say. And so he was risking his life and everything. But
And is that captured in his confessions or just in more of the annals of the time? It's in his confessions.
Yeah, he tells all that story.
It's almost like a biography as such, yeah.
I am Patrick. Mind you, he didn't write the confessions until he was brought back to a tribunal then, because, of course, the clergy in England didn't like what he was doing because he was so popular here. And they brought him back. And gosh, something very sad happened then. When he was brought back to the tribunal, he happened to be with his best friend, or a very good friend of his anyway, and he committed a crime. He confessed a crime that he had committed in his youth. Now, we don't know what that crime is. Was it?
There's a shadow side to him almost, yeah.
And what did the old confidant do? Only revealed it at the tribunal. So he was banished, and of course but anyway, he came back to Ireland, and that's when he wrote Confessions, and he mentions all that. I am Patrick, I am the accused one, many look down on me, I've had a very difficult time, but this was...
But we never find out what he was accused of. It's not in any other part. Interesting. So there's a kind of a mystery about him.
Yeah, there is a mystery. So whether it was thievery, murder, whatever, that's never revealed. Exactly.
Did he have? Because I was thinking about this earlier. When he began to preach, I suppose, and began to spread the Christianity word here, did he have much competition? Was there already other type of saint type people? I'm thinking of Declan or Bridget or the other kind of Kevins and stuff. Were they around, or who was his competition in a sense?
It's interesting you asked that. Like up before then, there had been a few other people sent by Rome, actually, to Christianise Ireland. But they all feared for their life, and they said, "Oh, God, get us out of here. Can't stand this at all." But Patrick was the one who persevered. And yes, he was contemporary of Bridget, and there are stories about Bridget and Patrick, and one time they were in deep conversation for 3 days, but it seemed to them as if it was only a few hours. This time had elapsed and all of that. But he certainly was the one who... And you see, he could capture the imagination, too, of people. Because even though we don't know as fact, but he would have used the shamrock, which was an old sacred plant, anyway, of the Druids. And he used that to explain the Trinity.
He was able to connect into the already history that was there. And I did find a little bit today of our shamrock. It's actually not the easiest plant to actually find, funny enough, but it's not the easiest one to find, but I did find a little bit, and I think clover is more obvious, but so he used this is why it's such a connection to St. Patrick's Day now, and we're all very familiar with people who want to wear the shamrock of the day. It's given as a gift to a lot of presidents and leaders across the world, from the Irish leaders, and that's a big part of it, and people go to wear it, and so much of the, I suppose, the paraphernalia around Patrick's Day has existed from this green shamrock. But he used it really because it symbolised something that the Druids linked into about the three deities, was it? In that the tree leaf shamrock.
Exactly, because up to then there would have been multi-gods, but then he was preaching that there was one God. But in this one God, there were three. So there was the Creator, there was the human Christ, and there was the Holy Spirit. And so it was very clever. The other image too that was around that time, Declan, is that the Trinity was seen, because the Trinity can be very complex, 3 in 1 and 1 in 3, the three musketeers, but it was a piece of cloth that would be folded in 3. And that was very much a Celtic image, or an Irish spiritual image of the Trinity, which is beautiful. And then, of course, they would say that he banished the snakes. But, of course, there weren't snakes in Ireland since the Ice Age. So really what you're thinking of there is a lot of feminists would say, of course, that snake was a metaphor for women.
And this does bring us to the point that he's speaking about a trinity of men, a patriarchy of Father, Son, Holy Spirit, which probably of his time. But as a result, he does leave out so much women, and women were left out and excluded, possibly because it was what's happening at the moment. But he doesn't do a lot for feminism, really, when we look back at him.
No, a bit of misogyny there, I suppose, but that was of its time.
And yet he was able to have this conversation with Bridget, which was interesting. So she was able to hold her own in a way, yeah. But it's of its time, you're missing a lot of the matriarchal or even the feminine elements that Christianity would have been the same what Christianity would have been doing at the time. So it's interesting to note that.
And of course, he was also very conscious of the directions, you see, which of course would have been a pre-Christian concept too, that you blessed the north, the south, the east, above you and below you, you know. And so the great prayer that's associated with him, Declan, is his breastplate, the Scialúrach Fádrig, which has this image of protection around you, you know, and it's a long poem. Now, it doesn't come up in his confessions, but I think it was first published maybe in the 11th century in this Laur Uman, this book of hymns that we have. And then I think there was a slight mention of it earlier, maybe in the 8th century, but the 11th century is our source for it. But it's 5 long sections, beautiful. And in it, one word comes up, which has lasted and is our word really for the Holy Spirit. Patrick invented it, which is Neart, Neart, Neart. And you know that proverb, Ní Neart go cur le chéile? It just means energy. In energy and in power, we are together. And I think that's particularly strong for your organisation, Declan, and indeed for all the world now, that in power, we are together in energy.
Because people are trying to hold an energy in a very different way, where we don't have the energy of meeting our friends and going to festivals or meeting in music. So you're trying to hold your own energy and other people's energy, the family's energy being at home. So Soniarity, almost spirit and energy then comes very closely together as the one word. Is there a word for energy in Irish?
I think it would be Neart too.
Well, okay, interesting.
Spirit, Fuinacht. You know, there are lots of words, but certainly Neart would be the oldest. So I want to sing you a small bit. Oh yeah.
Lovely.
I want to sing you a small bit of St. Patrick's breastplate. There are 5 sections into it. It's quite a long one. But it's very much, as I say, blessing the directions.
That's beautiful, Nora. So this is a piece that was Sean O'Riordan done in the 1950s, I take it, and it's a version of the breastplate.
Version of all the different directions, Declan, there, that Christ is replacing as opposed to the sun and the moon and the stars. So it was Christ before me, Christ in the eyes of everyone who sees me, Christ in the ears of everyone who hears me. So it's very beautiful. And may we all come safely to the heavenly realm.
Beautiful, Nóirín. There's something very soothing about that, actually, and very, very relaxing. And I do like the idea that he probably was appealing to maybe the old pagans, the Druids of the north, the south, the east, the west, above and below, and very like Buddhism in a way, that it does look at the 4 points and takes in all of those different angles. So he's quite quite different than maybe modern Christianity in ways. But so I'm interested as well as his confession and this breastplate, was that passed down in the church then, and is it available for people who, if you wanted to read his confessions, it's online, I presume, and is it kept in the museums or?
Oh, yeah. And lots of translations of it. And I think the one I used in my research now was written by Bishop Joseph Duffy. And I remember I found it. I was on the staff of Lochdarg, the place St. Patrick's pilgrimage, indeed, St. Patrick's Island. And I walked into the bookshop the first day, and that was the first book I picked up way before I started doing my research. And that really led me on to have Patrick as a model for listening to the voice of God there, And
it's waiting for you in the bookshop.
Exactly.
And is he buried there? If that's what Croagh Patrick is, that he's supposed? No, that was a mountain he was on, or
he's buried in Downpatrick in County Down there, along with Bridget and Columkill. There are 3 patron saints, and isn't it wonderful, Declan? I think we forget very often that we've an Englishman as our patron saint of Ireland.
It is unusual, and it's a Welshman, I suppose you could be more specific. It's unusual that we would pick a migrant almost in a way to be the patron saint. So when did he die, Nóirín?
Around 432, let's see, was that when he wrote the Confessions? So maybe around the 5th century, mid-5th century.
So when did we get to the point that he became a patron saint, or when was he appointed that? I presume he was made a saint first in Rome by a pope at some level, and then was brought to the level of patron saint. Do we know when that happened?
I'm no theologian on that side of things, church stuff. So I'm not sure, I suppose 19th century maybe, But my mother, I will give you a laugh, because I always think Patrick had a great sense of humour too, because he had to have a sense of humour, because he was constantly thinking up of new ways of interpreting the message, But my mother used to tell, I'll give you a little laugh now, my mother used to tell the story. She was great. My mother was, she was a very formidable school teacher, very cross, because I know I was in her class. But of course she had to be harder on us children, her children, because she couldn't be seen to favour us at all. But she used to always tell the stories right up to, way after she was retired, about this time she was teaching about St. Patrick, and it was coming up to St. Patrick's Day. And I think she used to say that St. Patrick's Day was probably on the Saturday. So all the week before she was doing with her 7-year-olds. Patrick is this, he was born, came here as a slave. He banished the snakes, he was shamrock. She could give them all the story, you see. And then on the Friday, so she said to them on the Friday then, now what did you learn about St. Patrick? What are you going to take home with you about St. Patrick for tomorrow? So they were all coming up, of course, with the shamrock and the snakes and all the different little facts about his life. And then my mother noticed one little fellow was quiet. And she said, and Jimmy, now, what did you learn about St. Patrick? This is a true story now. And St. Patrick came to Ireland, and he asked the Irish, what do they want? And the Irish said to St. Patrick, Patrick, would you go to Rome? And would you meet Christy Hannity? And would you ask Christy if he'd like to come to Ireland? Now, remember that Hannity is quite a common surname around here. And so St. Patrick sailed to Rome on a boat. And there he met Christy. And he said, Christy Hannity, would you like to come to Ireland? And Christy said he would. And Christy Hannity and Patrick sailed to Ireland in a boat, and that's how Christianity came to Ireland.
Very good. And this is from the mouth of a child, of course, which is even more interesting. Yeah, Christy Hannity. Very good. And do you know something that's lovely? I suppose the stories are so important. I mean, the fact that we're great storytellers is what's loved the world over. So a lot of people absolutely love whether we're telling our stories through our music, through that kind of Irish traditional music, through the poetry, through our art, through our literature. And that's really what's celebrated right across the world in a way is our ability, again, to use the ear, whether we're hearing a story or whether we're listening to somebody else telling a story, or whether we're picking up on something and making a new story out of it and passing it on. So again, I think you're absolutely right that the ear and the hearing and whether we're hearing or listening is a really big part of the Irish culture in a way, and what we're able to gift to the people, particularly through our music and stuff. And as I'm thinking, I probably answered my own question in the sense of when did it become important? Possibly more so when the Republic was formed, and when, of course, in 1916 and onwards, and we become to have this very important national day with the and I know the army has its own parade and stuff on the 17th of March. You've travelled a lot, Nóirín. You've played in a lot. You're an internationally acclaimed musician, musicologist, and you must have probably been asked to perform in many interesting parts in St. Patrick's Day over the years. Are there any that stand out for you that you remember with fondness, or ones that you'd love to forget as well?
There are a lot. I remember one time I was in India on a cultural exchange between Ireland and the ICCR, the Indian Council of Cultural Relations. And that was around St. Patrick's Day. And that was very colourful because there were all sorts of, bringing us in these green drinks and all sorts of green garlands and being placed on our heads and all of that. And I remember meeting with a group of women, they would have been diplomats' wives, around St. Patrick, and them telling them little bits and pieces about him. And of course they were astounded that he was never married or never, attached to a woman. But you're so right to go back to your point, though, there about the stories, Declan. I think this is what we're learning here over this time, these COVID times too, that we're learning to share stories with one another in a way we never did before. I think we're learning to listen to people in a new kind of way, just in the same way as we're here on Zoom. It's a different, we've become much more attentive to really listening to one another.
We're also seeing a lot of people who are actually taking the time to write and to do a lot more. We're hoping to launch our book, Holding It Together Apart, or have our creative writing book that we're hoping to launch the next month. So we've really seen people who've never published anything before writing and getting together in that, which is great. I suppose then, is there any other major music that you associate with St. Patrick's Day yourself, that you've performed or that you've played that you'd like to perform here, or that that brings St. Patrick's Day or says St. Patrick's Day to you?
Oh, absolutely. And you see, you brought up Hail Glory St. Patrick, because for years and years and years I've been going in on St. Patrick's Day when I'm around to the Augustinian Church here in Limerick. And so this is always, they put up the words of Hail Glorious. Well, Cocooning Ní Riain is the Irish one, of course, first. And yes. Then that would be the entrance hymn. And then Hail Glorious St. Patrick. And everybody sings away. A wonderful little hymn, Declan, that was written in, when was it? The 1880s, I think, or maybe even 1852, by a nun called Sister Agnes. She was a mercy nun from Cove. And she entered the convent in Charleville. And then she travelled widely, but apparently a very wonderful little poet. And she wrote this poem, and it was first published, I think, in 1882.
And then became a song. Okay. And it's a very powerful song, because I remember, I can still hear Frank Patterson in my mother playing him, and also the earlier John McCormack. And it's the power of it. They made it a very powerful piece, with the full orchestra and things. So that's one that I remember a lot as a kid. So
exactly. So I'll take you over now, and we can.
Brilliant. We'll have a listen to that version of that.
And we'll continue our conversation over at my little harmonium then.
So Nóirín, this is Hail Glory St. Patrick you're going to perform for us along with the speech box. That's wonderful.
Lovely. So I'll start with the one verse of the Irish, Cocooning Ní Riain, and then go into it. And we'll see what happens. It's a world premiere. I haven't done this before.
Wonderful. Holding It Together Apart, world premiere with Nóirín Ní Riain of Cocooning Ní Riain and Hail Glory St. Patrick.
dear saint of our isle, on us thy poor children bestow a sweet smile. And now thou art high in thy mansions above, on Erin's green valley look down on thy love. On Erin's green valleys, on Erin's green valleys, on Erin's green valleys, look down in thy love. God bless and defend the sweet land of our birth, where the shamrock still blooms as when you were on earth, and our hearts still yet burn where'er we roam, for God and Saint Patrick and our native home. For God and Saint Patrick, for God and Saint Patrick, for God and Saint Patrick and our native home. On COVID's dark valleys, on COVID's dark valleys, on COVID's dark valleys, look down in thy love, look down in thy love.
Beautiful, Nóirín. That's absolutely gorgeous. And what's coming to me there as you're playing it is, I suppose what's so important about these songs is they meant so much to Irish immigrants abroad. And when you're talking about the native home and that we return to it and we remember the green, and we would be a very different, probably, St. Patrick's Day if we hadn't all of those immigrants abroad, because it's that nostalgic love for the Ireland land, and so many of these songs, no matter where they are written in memory and in love of it. And I suppose that's what St. Patrick's is about, and was what's important about it for so many people across the world, because we have such a massive Irish diaspora all over the world. You mentioned India there. You performed in India, which has almost a similar flag to Ireland. But all over the world, I don't think there's anywhere you can go where you won't find some little Irish bar or something being celebrated on St. Patrick's Day. I don't know that there's any other country in the world that has a national day that's almost an international day.
You're absolutely right. I mean, he's the most famous saint in the whole wide world, you know. And and rightly so, because he does live up to that. He had such resilience. I love that word resilient, actually, because I think that's a great word for our time too, Declan. It comes from two words, salire, which is two Latin words. Re means back, and salire means to bounce or to jump. So we're resilient. We're great resilient people. We are jumping back into looking after each other, becoming interconnected now. We're looking at nature, of course, which is the epitome of resilience.
And this is a man himself who bounced back from being kidnapped, coming across on a boat, probably in a very difficult positions, we're talking about the 5th century here as well, being a shepherd. I only imagine the conditions, but then to return back to Wales and to deal with the psychological effect of that, but also then to come back to Ireland and to battle. So you're absolutely right. He's a man that shows huge strength and resilience in the face of adversity. So we could take a lot of essence from him. I am drawn back to, though, the interesting fact that there's this bit of a shadow about him, that he has admitted to a crime, but we don't know what the crime is now. But I'm thinking, we were talking about this earlier, that there might be a spark of what the crime might have been. He travelled to every single county bar one. And could you tell us a little bit about that?
I wonder, can the viewers guess what country that was?
It would be probably the greatest sin if that he means that he didn't get to it. But it is, of course, the southern county of County Kerry. He never got to County Kerry, apparently. Okay.
He never got to there. And there's a lovely little poem. It's a marvellous writer, actually, called Paddy Connelly. He should be so much more well known. He's written wonderful books and poems. He was a school teacher. He is a school teacher in Kerry. And he wrote this little poem about that very moment, because on the Hill of Foynes, there is a cross dedicated to Patrick. And so this is a little poem around that legend as to why Patrick never went to Kerry. As far south I made it as the Hill of Foynes, and there, exhausted from success, I stopped for a brief respite. But the Lord, insatiable as ever, urged me to still further go. Climb up that hill, said the Lord. Climb up that hill, he said. Look west toward Kerry, and I will give you a vision of what it is awaits you in that pagan kingdom. Lord, I said, when I had seen that vision, your wish is ever my command, but ask me not, I beg you, to visit that incorrigible land, where men talk only from one day to the next about winning the All-Ireland. Football and booze and sex are their three unholy trinity. And thinking how they know all the answers. Sure, will they ever listen to me? And the Lord, for once, took pity on his lowly servant. Patrick, he said, I will not ask you to tread on that unreceptive ground. Impart your blessing on them now, and from this hilltop, then climb back down and turn around.
Wonderful. No, I never heard that before. But that's a great story, and I'm sure the Kerry people will be very proud. In some ways that he didn't come there. He certainly missed out on probably the most beautiful part of Ireland, and a place where St. Patrick's Day is celebrated incredibly well, because they have such a history in music and in that. But I love that's a great version of the poem. But so, like, as we come to the end now, I suppose, what will you be doing yourself for St. Patrick's Day? It's very different this year. I know a lot of people actually sometimes don't like St. Patrick's Day because it can be, as I say, a focus on drinking, and the pubs can be quite crazy, and there can be a lot of crazy activity around it. This year is very different because people will be at home, celebrating St. Patrick's Day. Is there anything what you'll be doing yourself, but also you'd recommend for people to do that they can do in holding the essence and the energy of St. Patrick's Day?
Well, I suppose advice for people would be to do your own parade, to get out into nature and parade out there and celebrate the true Patrick, because you'd sometimes look at parades and you'd say, God, what would St. Patrick think of all of this, Whereas to get out there now and just to bless the directions too, as he did too, because he was very focused on that. And of course, this year, you see, everything is so different, Declan. I have at least 3 different events for people, 2 in America, of people who are coming in to me talking about St. Patrick and all of that. And my 2 sons and myself are having a little, what we call a Dov Immel, a little edge school there around Patrick as well too.
And so much of everything will be online this year because that's where people are. But I do like that idea of being able to go out in the garden because it's also a wonderful time for nature. Everything's coming into bloom. Birds are beginning to nest. We've had some wonderful weather recently, so people are able to get back out in the garden again. I know Muirne Bloomer, who works with us and works with St. Patrick's Festival, is helping people create their own parades at home as well. So you can still have the fun and maybe a little drop of the Ishkabaha as well to keep us all warm in the coldest nights. But we'll leave you the little shamrock. That's our little shamrock, Nóirín. I hope you do have great blessings for a very peaceful and lovely St. Patrick's Day. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us today. It's really good to chat to you and learn all these little stories. And there's such an important essence of our Irishness because they're the things we can pass on. And you've given me a couple of great stories to certainly maybe entertain people with for Patrick's Day, particularly that poem. But so you can follow us on our website, everybodyholdingittogetherapart.com, where we have other interviews at Nóirín, and we'd love to hear from your ideas on celebrating St. Patrick's Day and hear what people are doing as well. But for now, we'll wish everybody a very láféile pádraic. I hope we have a happy, peaceful St. Patrick's Day. Thank you so much, Nóirín, and a very happy St. Patrick's Day to all of you as well. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. We'll chat to you soon.